Welcome to episode 316, the Stone Cold Steve Austin edition of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Bet365. It's the largest sporting betting platform globally. You can open an account with Bet365 and use the promo code DAILY365 to bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm Jason Greger. Frank Saravalli joins us today from sunny Vegas. Sunny might be an understatement for lovely 42 degrees. And Frank, I know you're a huge fan of the heat. So I heard that you and Steve Ellis might have taken a little stroll yesterday. So you're probably really enjoying that.
What is he talking about?
Oh, you didn't Steve said that he walked like 30 minutes in Vegas yesterday and mentioned Frank. And I was like, what? You were outside for 30
foot out of this hotel since I got here. There's
zero.
It's 113 degrees outside. I'm not built for this heat. There's no way I'd be leaving my room.
Okay, yeah. Well, I was kind of chucked in when he said, maybe he just said he walked from the Frank Saravalli Hotel. Maybe that's what it was.
But. Yeah, that wasn't me. Trust me. If I had to leave this hotel, which I will, to go to the awards and the draft, it will not be by foot.
Shock. Hey, before we get to the draft and everything, congratulations. The Florida Panthers win their first ever Stanley Cup as an organization in Game 7 in a thrilling fashion, and really a great finish to what was an excellent 2024 playoffs from start to finish.
And an iconic Stanley Cup Final. I mean, that was as good as it gets in terms of drama, entertainment, everything that you want in a Stanley Cup Final. I know there's a lot of heartbroken people in Northern Alberta this week. Nothing to hang your heads about. That team showed a ton of fight, and the Panthers, they deserve all the credit being able to flush games 4, 5, and 6 in that series and find a way to finish off the job in Game 7. They put an absolute clinic on in terms of defensive performance in Game 7, and it was a series for the ages.
Oh, yeah. No, Edmonton had their chances, McDavid and Hyman in the third period, and just couldn't finish. And so the Panthers now hoist the cup, and they'll turn quickly to signing Sam Reinhart, which will probably be, I think, priority number one for their offseason.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt they've been trying for months to sign Sam Reinhart. And that's the thing that's a little bit tough for me to figure out is they've put a massive offer on the table already. They were talking about 8 years times $9.5 million, I believe. And if it were as easy as that, it would have been done already. So I don't know exactly what they're looking for. We know the no Florida state income tax is a huge part of the equation in terms of what that looks like in a cap hit. AFP Analytics says in a normal cap environment at $88 million, he's looking at 11.3 a year based on percentage of cap and the season that he had. That seems high. But it only takes one team, right? And maybe after winning a Stanley Cup and getting to 2 consecutive finals, maybe you look at things a little bit differently. Maybe the Panthers, having achieved the ultimate goal, maybe they look at things a little bit differently and say, we have a limit here. And as much as we want to keep him, we can't exceed that.
Well, I really like Sam Reinhart, but I don't think he's the driver of the line. And, it was an unbelievable year for him. But if you look at his other years, like that's always the risk, is when a guy has a career year and then it's a contract year and you pay him off of that, thinking that that's what's going to be repeatable. Well, I don't really think that's repeatable.
59 goals did he have?
59, yeah.
7? I
57.
mean, that part is probably not entirely repeatable, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that if he were back with playing with the same players, he's that smart. And he's been able to read off of Barkov to see this is a guy that was scoring 30 and 30 consistently. I don't think it's a stretch to see him in the 45 to 50 goal range every year moving forward. Will he get as high as he did this year? Maybe not. And he did, of course, slow down toward the back half of the year. I mean, he had I think he had 30 goals before Christmas. So it was a torrid pace. He might be the smartest player in the league. Like, that's not an exaggeration. He's an extremely intelligent hockey player.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it. He was a consistent 20 goal man in Buffalo every year except one, with a high of 25. Then he went to Florida. He had 33, 31, 82 points, 67 points, and jumped up to 57 and 94, which is, an unreal year, no question about it. But I'd be hesitant to give him that much. Even like the fact that he turned down, if your numbers are correct, Frank, and he turned down 8 years at 9.5. I honestly, I question why anyone would give him more than that. To be honest, that'd be kind of strange. So we'll see what happens with him. Jake Guentzel's another big name. Steven Stamkos, Frank, looking like they're coming down to the wire. This is reminiscent of the first time he had free agency and ended up re-signing in Tampa Bay. But this one seems a little different. What's your sense on Steven Stamkos?
Well, they don't have the cap space to be able to give him what he's looking for. And I don't know exactly what that is, but this is a player who's on the franchise Mount Rushmore. So I think there's been enough angst, meaning I don't want to call it friction or frustration, but you can tell that from the beginning of the season when he didn't get an offer last summer, that Steven Stamkos has been kind of perturbed about how this has played out in Tampa. And I don't think, at least my understanding is, that the ask is not outrageous. Like, my guess is that something like 3 times $6 million a year or in that neighborhood gets it done. They don't have the cap space to do it. And I think my point would be they have to try and find a way to move Tanner Jeannot. That has not worked out. He's played 75 games, and I think he scored 7 or 8 goals. They traded a first, second, third, fourth, and fifth round pick plus Cal Foote to get him from Nashville. And he has a no trade clause that kicks in on Monday. He's on our trade targets board because you've got to find a way to create space. And Jeannot playing on your fourth line at under $3 million a year makes no sense. Like, don't let someone like Tanner Jeannot get in the way of the Steven Stamkos era in Tampa Bay ending. Sometimes when you make a mistake and a first, second, third, fourth, and fifth round pick for Jeannot is a stone cold mistake, Julian Breezeball hasn't had swings and misses. This is a bad one.
Yeah. Well, even, right now they're at 82 mil. They only have 6 million cap space. So yes, moving his 2.66 mil would free up enough if you want to get him, but then they still got to fill out the rest of the roster. I think they'd have to move someone else as well if they want to get Stamkos in, Frank. I just don't see where they have the money. If he's going to get 6 and you take away Jeannot, well, then you're still at 86 mil. And then you still have, 3 or 4, even if you get guys at league minimum, that's only 3 other bodies you can fill in. So they're going to have to move somebody with money that's even higher than Jeannot, I think, if they want to get back Steven Stamkos.
Why did they give all that money to Ryan McDonagh, though?
Dude, I'm totally with you.
I think everyone understands the value that McDonagh brings, but it's not 6.75. He's not commensurate to his cap hit. He's a good player, but he's at this stage of his career, he should be in the $4 million range. Why did they feel the need to go out and do that again? Like, again, if you're thinking big picture and you're thinking, this is how we're going to devote money on our cap, it's not going to be to McDonagh. It's not going to be to Jeannot. Like, I'm starting with Stamkos and I'm figuring out everything else from there.
Oh, yeah, it makes total sense with me. So we'll see. Now, the other big name free agent is Jake Guentzel. And Frank, yesterday, the Vancouver Canucks cleared out some money, moving Mikheyev and a second and the rights to Lafferty. They get a 4th back, and they move out the majority of their money to Chicago. And Sam Reinhart's a BC guy, and then Jake Guentzel's got the Rutherford connection. Do you see the Canucks trying to step up here into the plate on one of those two guys?
Oh yeah, that was by design. I had been mentioning Mikheyev because they wanted to take a run at Guentzel, put him on our trade targets board 2 weeks ago. They had been trying to move Mikheyev going back to last year's deadline, unsuccessful in doing that. They really didn't want to attach a sweetener to it. And then the Wallman trade happened. And once that did, you knew that it was in the second round pick range, even if that deal might have been a little bit of an outlier. And the Blackhawks were able to kind of make it a little bit better for Vancouver by making it a pick swap. Both picks traded 2027 draft. So two things. One, the Canucks basically slide down 60 picks in the draft in order to make this happen, which is a worthy endeavor in and of itself. But on top of that, they, when you look at the way that this all worked out, the Canucks have now opened this window to be able to go after Guentzel. You're probably going to see them re-sign Zadorov first, because that's the pecking order that this probably has to go in. So they got Hronek done. This is part of the plan that I had mentioned. Hronek done, trade Mikheyev, re-sign Zadorov, go after Jake Guentzel, provided that he makes it to market on July 1. And you've got the formula of a really, a solid team that has a chance to compete again.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the door off, does he get $5 million?
Depends on the term, I think. If you're willing to go longer term, I think he does. Like if you're willing to go 6 years, if not, I think he's probably sub. It's hard to say, honestly. That's a game of chicken, by the way, because as much as Nikita Zadorov wants to wish and hope and speak into the universe that he's a top pair defenseman, and I think the Canucks are in danger of some real recency bias with the run in the playoffs. He's still, in my eyes and in the eyes of many league executives, is still a number 4 defenseman in the NHL. And if you start paying your number 4 like a number 2, things become problematic for your cap. I think term isn't as big of a concern for me because I think he's going to age pretty well. Not only is he in tremendous shape, but big guys tend to hold up pretty well. Yeah. So you never really know with that, but I'd be pretty confident keeping him in that. Like if I were to project where does this ultimately come in, it's like somewhere like 6 times 475 or 6 times 5. The real question is, if he doesn't take it, what does he think he can get on the market? And if you're his agent, you better be really confident that you're going to get something that good.
Yeah, because once you get out there, and then it's a big matzo ball if the teams aren't offering you what you think you're worth, which is, it's always the case. There's always some guys who go to market and think they're going to get bigger deals and don't. And then there's others that go to market and get way bigger deals than you expect. The most recent one, of course, would be Gabranson. I don't think many people thought he was going to get $4 million, and so good for him. So it kind of always works both ways. I'm interested as we get to free agency. What about trades, Frank? There's always some teams looking to free up some more money. We saw the Vancouver Canucks do it. All the GMs are in Vegas, and who knows if this will be the last draft with all the GMs at the draft. There's talk that they style draft next season where they just have representatives of teams there and not necessarily all the management team. We'll see. But what's your expectation as all the teams arrive into Vegas as far as trades and any other names that you think are really hot right now on your trade board?
Well, by the way, just in terms of the draft, I think the league is actually hopeful that they'll be able to, I know what the GMs and organizations voted in terms of preference. I think they're hopeful that they'll be able to convince them that, hey, we should stick with this idea of an in-person draft. I think they really like the idea of everyone getting together. And I'll say that the teams and managers really like having everyone in the same city. Sometimes it's easier to do business. I just think there's such a competitive disadvantage on the draft floor that you have to do your business in front of everyone else. When you pick up the phone and only one other person's on the phone, it's not really hard to piece together A, who you're talking to, and B, what you're up to. And that part of it doesn't really make much sense. If you put each team in their own suite as a sort of war room, that might be one way to work around it instead of actually on the draft floor. And you only send maybe one person down to go on stage to actually welcome the player. The NFL they don't bring the entire entourage on the stage when players selected. Like, you don't need to do that part of it. So I think there are ways to kind of get a happy medium. It's two things: travel, because you waste 2 days during the week traveling your entire staff back and forth. It's not the cost, it's the opportunity cost of that time when everyone's in the air. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned, the competitive disadvantage. So are there ways to solve some of those things? Maybe. In terms of players that could be on the move, I'm real curious about the New York Rangers are one. I added Jacob Trouba, their captain, to our trade targets board yesterday. I don't think by any means it's a lock that Trouba gets moved. I think the Rangers are weighing all of their options. They're an aggressive team. And when you see the impact of, their cap and Trouba's impact on it, that it leaves you with not as much flexibility as you'd like. They've gotten through the first 6 years of that deal. He has 2 left at $8 million. And for the first time in the deal on Monday, he goes from the full no move to a modified or limited no trade clause that they gain some additional flexibility. I don't know that they need that. I think a lot of people were curious with the Red Wings moving their cap around and trading Jake Wallman, for instance. What does Steve Yzerman have up his sleeve? Is Jacob Trouba a Michigan native? Is he one of the guys that the Red Wings are looking at? I reported yesterday that they're talking to the Anaheim Ducks about John Gibson. So when you look at Trouba, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that with only 2 years left on that deal, like, teams might not absolutely love the cap hit, but he has positive trade equity. Like, this isn't a guy that you're dumping. He's still an intense physical leader that when you have a team that's been a non-playoff team, you need guys like Jacob Trouba to help get you there. And for some team for 2 years, that's a worthy experiment if you have lots of cap space.
Yeah, that's it's a name that when you look at a team that goes as deep as the Rangers do, to move their captain. I know some people look at the cap hit and feel like you're not getting that return on your investment per se for $8 million, because he doesn't put up a lot of offensive numbers, right? He's a physical.
He can still get you 30 points, and he's not really playing. He's not playing playoff time because Adam Fox is taking that playoff time.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, he's a unique defender, Frank, because there's just not many hitters in the NHL. Like, it's a skill. It is hard to time it and hit. Sure, every now and then you're going to, maybe catch a guy borderline, but guess what? That keeps the other team honest and keeps their head up. There's just not many guys who bring that element to the game. It just isn't. So, certain teams, I could see it, that would put a high emphasis on that. So, it's an interesting name to hear about.
Yeah,
hey, let's bring.
Before we do that, just a couple other names that have, circled through the trade targets board or have been, I guess you should say, added. Of course, Rucker McGroarty and that situation with the Winnipeg Jets. We talked about Mikheyev already. Keep an eye on the Sens and what happens with Jacob Chychrun. The Colorado Avalanche are trying to clear money. Ross Colton is the guy that they've been talking to teams about trying to move. We touched on Gibson briefly, Jeannot. What do the Islanders do with their cap situation, by the way? Is there any chance they buy out JG Pageau? Do they try and find a taker for Pageau? Like, that's a really important name over the next 72 hours, because he stands out to me as the one guy that's sort of clearly out of whack with their cap. And then right at the top of the board, you've still got Mitch Marner and you've still got Marty Necas. And look, I've said this and I'll be super consistent about Mitch Marner. And I feel like it's important to bring up again, because there seems to be others that, and they listen to and hear what Brad Treliving said publicly with his press conference and media availability pre-draft here in Vegas on Wednesday, that he said, look, I'm not paying to the reports, don't believe everything you hear and read out there, is essentially the gist of it. But at no point did he say, I'm not engaging in discussions on Mitch Marner. The way I view this process is, and the information that I've gleaned from this process is, there's an order to this. Because Mitch Marner has the full no move, no trade, or full no trade, I should say, he holds all the cards. His camp has said publicly, we intend to play out the year. And the key word there is intend.
Yeah.
There's nothing to talk about right now. Like they're saying all the right things in terms of, public perception. The Leafs need to go out and get a deal first. They need to have something tangible that they're willing to do for one of the top 15 players in the game in order to make that happen. So until they have an offer or offers, potentially multiple, options that they could present to them, there's no reason in trying to arm wrestle Mitch Marner and his camp over the clause until that happens. So make no mistake, at this exact moment in time this week, the Toronto Maple Leafs are talking to teams about Mitch Marner and what that might look like. Whether that materializes, one, and whether someone's willing to step up and pay commensurate value, and then two, whether or not Mitch Marner accepts the trade if they were able to get through the first part of the equation, those are two entirely different things. But my reporting, and I stand by it, and I want to be ultra clear about it, that's what the discussion is right now behind the scenes. They are talking to teams and trying to, what are you interested in? What could we do? And then you deal with the other parts of that equation later. So that's what's happening right now. And, believe what else you want to believe. And maybe that doesn't materialize, or maybe they block it in the end. But I believe they're trying to do everything in their power to make a move.
Well, which makes sense. And I don't think you want to be in a situation where you ask the guy first before you have any tangible, trades to bring him. He's got a full no move. So what has to happen is you talk to teams, you find out, okay, these teams are interested. All right, Mitch, here's 3 teams. You can go here, you can go here, you can go here. Now, you're not going to tell them what the offer is or anything like that, but there's some teams that are interested in you because he's going to have to waive it.
Hold on a second. It can't just be interest. It needs to be, this is a deal we are willing to accept, and here is the option for you. Yes or no.
Yeah, because you're not going to, I don't think you want to go to a player and say, oh, are you interested? Tell us if you will, and then we'll go look for it. It makes no sense. You have to say, hey, I've got a deal done, 100%. This is the deal. Away we go. And like if I'm Mitch Marner, and if the team, like I understand people have no movement clauses, and I think it's much more beneficial, Frank, during the season. Especially if you're a family man and you got kids and everything in school, that you can say, no, I don't want to get dealt. Like Linus Ullmark. He vetoed his during the season, but then guess what? He ended up getting traded in the summer, and the summertime for Mitch Marner is where it makes the most sense for me. And at this point, Frank, I'd be more surprised if he wasn't dealt than if he is dealt. It's just a matter of, which teams are going to come up and what's going to be the return. I think that to me is the fascinating question.
Well, that's the toughest part of all of this is what do the Leafs deem as appropriate value for a player of such impact? It's entirely possible that they don't get there, meaning they don't find what they're looking for. That's the hard part. I don't think the hard part is once you do that, finding a way to have him come to terms with the no trade. I think that's relatively, I'm not saying it's easy by any stretch, but I don't think it's going to be that difficult, because I believe in the long run, it's not in his best interest to stay if that's what ends up happening.
Yeah.
The hard part is, which team has the ability to take on the cap hit? Which team has assets that you like? It can't be futures, because you're not in a futures type scenario unless you believe you can package them and flip them for something else, which is playing chess and not checkers, you have this a difficult transaction to pull off. So like, I want to be clear about that part of it. Like, I'm not saying it's likely. All I'm saying is they are engaging in discussions and trying.
Which I think I understand why you should. It's a big name, and I think people would be surprised, Frank, at how often players' names are talked about in trades that never get leaked out and people don't know about it. It wouldn't be the first time big name you go down a path and then ultimately it doesn't happen. It happens quite frequently sometimes. It just, you don't get the deal you want. This GM's interested in moving a guy, and it's not always your bottom tier guys. I've talked to GMs many times where they're like, yeah, I'm lucky because I was close to wanting to trade this guy. We never did. And 2 years later, he was a real major part of our team. So I think people be surprised sometimes at how often there are conversations that never get made public.
It's all the time. There's only so much that myself and the other insiders can learn. There are teams that are total steel vaults in terms of information. That does happen, but this also shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, Jay. Like we talked about at the end of the Maple Leaf season, this is an incredibly important season in summer in general for the Marner, just dealing with Marner as an asset. I don't think they have any interest in extending him. He has said he doesn't want to negotiate on an extension this summer. And if that's the case, with you have a player of that magnitude entering the final year of his deal and you're not extending him, you don't really want to let him walk for not, like, to say nothing of the playoff failures. Even if they had success, you wouldn't let an asset of that magnitude walk for nothing just to do it and play out the season. So this needed to be addressed one way or the other. And we would have been crazy to say 6 to 8 weeks ago that this wasn't something that would be talked about in this exact juncture this week.
Yeah, no, wholeheartedly agree with you. So I'm curious about, the Utah, before we get to Tyler, one last one on Utah, Frank, because this is really the first offseason. I can remember that Bill Armstrong he's going to go to the draft. He's got a lot of picks. He's got a lot of cap space, but he has an owner who says, hey, we can actually spend the cap space on actual live bodies who can contribute, not guys on LTIR to get us to the cap floor. And that to me is what I'm fascinated by, is to see how Utah becomes a player and something like now there's 32, right? For a while there, Frank, there was a few teams that just weren't players. And that was Arizona. They were never really one. Now they are one. And I'm curious how that maybe changes courses and how aggressive Bill Armstrong can be.
I think they'll be mildly aggressive. I think they also want to be really cautious. The worst thing you can do this summer is screw it up your cap when you've got a great cap picture and a bunch of young guys coming by taking on older vets with term that block your players from progressing and giving them an opportunity to win spots in your lineup, and B, block them out from a pure cap perspective from continuing to evolve. And I think at least the word on the street has been that the Utah Hockey Club has essentially said to some, whispered to some agents ahead of free agency, hey, we're looking for guys on 2 and 3 year deals. We're willing to pay $6-7 million a year to do it, but we're term limited. Like, we're not going to be going crazy on 8-year deals.
No.
And that's the goal. I talked to Bill Armstrong in Vancouver during the playoffs. He was out there on a scouting trip, and he said, my only job this summer is to not screw it up. Don't get locked into anything crazy. It'll be tempting because everyone's going to throw something at you that looks like a life raft, but is really disguised as an anchor. And there's some good players available. Don't get locked into anything crazy.
Well, the fact that you could, to me, that's being a big player, Frank, when you can offer guys short-term deals and big AAVs. Now you're a player, which they never really were before. And that kind of changes it. And some players will look and say, hey, 2 years at big money, great. It's life altering, man. It's only a 2-year deal. Like, I think sometimes, you hear so many veterans, you reach a point in your life. Well, now it's just about wanting a chance to win, right? And they're signing for $1 million or $1.5 million. So you have 2 years where you get $7 million. They got 14 million bucks. You're fine unless you're a moron with your money. You're fine. So after that, you can quote take less, which usually taking less is like, it's not like guys are signing for 1 million that we could be getting 4 or 5. You know what I mean? So I always chuckle when we hear take less. It's there's no one that's taken a massive sacrifice, at least that we haven't seen. So I'll be curious.
All these sacrifices are, let's just get some perspective on what the sacrifice really is.
Exactly.
More money in 1 year than most 98% of the people on the planet will earn in a lifetime.
Yeah. Let's bring in Tyler Yaremchuk. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing good, gentlemen. Ready to roll here with another edition of Fill in the Blank, and it is brought to you by us at Daily Faceoff. A reminder that we are going to be going live on July 1st with our free agency special, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. I'll be there. Frank will be there. We'll have friends from around the league going coast to coast, covering everything, and I'll even be joined by 2 former NHLers in Colby Cohn and Carter Hutton. You won't want to miss it live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. All right, let's get into things here. One of the big trade targets you guys didn't hit on here in the first sort of 35 minutes of the podcast is Martin Necas. Your fill in the blank is the team that should push the hardest for Martin Necas is blank. Which team do you think should maybe be willing to part with a first-round pick in tomorrow's draft to get him? Frank, I'll let you go first.
I'd like to see him in Chicago. I think he's got a game-breaking potentiality to him. I think the Hawks have got loads of cap space. He's not gonna, it's gonna be an expensive deal in the sense that, yeah, he's gonna be in that, depending on how long you go, in that $7.5 to $8 million range plus a year. To me, I reported yesterday that league sources indicated that they believe the New Jersey Devils have the number 10 overall pick on the table for Necas in a deal that could materialize depending on how the draft board shakes out. I get the idea of the Devils going after him. I just don't know that they need him. Like, they've got so much talent up front. Does it really? I get the idea of moving your number 10 overall pick. I'd like to see them they've solidified their goaltending. Go get another defenseman that has some experience. That's how I'd look at it. But if you could add in Necas to a group that has Hughes, Heischer, Bratt, Dawson Mercer, go down the list. Like, they've got some really good players. The Devils are going to be a force. So, depends on what stage of the build you're at, but I could also see Buffalo too. Like, Buffalo makes a lot of sense. They need more scoring. They've got the assets. They've got the ability to do it. They're picking right behind New Jersey at 11. I think there's a real good chance that deal materializes between now and Friday night.
Greg's, who do you like? Who should be targeting Necas?
$7.5 million. Did I hear that correct?
Dude, he already has a 71-point season under his belt.
Yeah, it's kind of the outlier, I guess. Like, he had 53 points last year. I don't know. Maybe I look at what other guys make. Like, that is good for him if he gets it. But oh my goodness,
not an outlier. It's not an outlier based on where the cap is going. He's going to be on an 8-year deal or 7-year deal. He's going to be very well paid.
No, I don't discount that. But like, he's had one season of more than 54 points in his career. Like, that's a pretty big ticket if you get. Now, the guy can fly. I'll say that. I like a lot about his game, but man, I was thinking more $6 million, something that I would see him at. But we'll see. You stole my team in Buffalo. So the other team that I think could use him would be Nashville. And now that might not be a high enough pick at, what are they, 22nd, I think. But I'll say the Nashville Predators, man. They still need, to me, they always could use a little bit more offensive punch.
I do like that Nashville answer, actually. Next one, buyout news. Some rumblings about the Sabres and Jeff Skinner. The Sabres buying out Jeff Skinner would be blank. Complete the sentence, Greggs.
Well, if he gets bought out, fellas, that will push him over $100 million in earnings. And now he's never played a playoff game. We talked earlier, Frank, about if there was ever a player who would sign a real discount to look and say, I just want to get in the playoffs, I just want to play for a team, then that's him. If he gets bought out, the one thing I'd say, Jeff Skinner, you've made $100 million, man. So I would assume you're set, your family's set for decades if you're smart with your money. Decades. So if Buffalo does it, clears up a lot of cap space, actually makes sense. And I think he's a guy that if he picked the right team, he could be a huge asset to a team and do what he's never done in the playoffs, which at this point in his career, I got to think is the priority, not worrying about ego, not worrying about money, nothing else. So you already made 100 mil. So to me, Jeff Skinner would actually have some value, a lot, 31, 33, 24 goals the last 3 seasons. He's a guy that if he gets bought out and you convince him that, hey, we can give you a playoff opportunity. And, I look at like Jonathan Drouin, but better. And maybe you pay him 1.5, maybe $2 million. I think he signs in the right team. He could have a real big impact.
So you're saying it would make sense. Frank, you're saying blank.
I don't know. I still don't call me crazy. I don't understand this buyout.
They have $24 million.
Cap space is not an issue. And 1 year ago, he had 82 points. This is a team that needs more goals, not less. Let's say at the bare minimum, Jeff Skinner's getting you 25. He's historically shown he averages more than that. This is a team that was 23rd in the league in goals scored last year. Why are you removing goals for the sake, unless he's a pain in the ass and a problem, which I've never heard anyone say that about Jeff Skinner. I do not understand the idea of especially get through another year. The longer you can get, the more you can get through the contract before deciding that it's an absolute problem is just way more beneficial to your cap in the future. I understand the pressure that Kevin Adams is facing to try and turn this team around. He said with me a few weeks ago on Frankly Speaking, it's go time. I get it. I just help me understand why removing 25 goals from your lineup to ham up your cap is a move that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes more sense for Skinner, not for Buffalo.
Yeah, you're almost giving Skinner like a little bit. You're almost in a weird way doing right by the player by buying him out, maybe, I guess. I don't know. Last one I got for you guys is a name on Frank's board, and you guys talked about the Florida Panthers, their offseason plans in Edmonton. Darnell Nurse is on Frank's board. There is a blank % chance that the Oilers trade Darnell Nurse this summer, Frank.
There is a 25% chance.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, you could say that that's high. Is there a way that they retain some money? We view every player in this league, and the best example of this is recent in Oliver Ekman-Larsson. We view every player in this league solely through the prism of his cap hit. It was untenable in Vancouver at that number, $7+ million, based on how he was playing. He gets bought out. The pressure's off. He's free to play. So he has a great Stanley Cup Final game 6 and 7. They shift him to power play 1, and he's playing huge minutes for that team. I'm not saying Darnell Nurse is going to all of a sudden snap his fingers next season and flip back into being an upper echelon defenseman. But if Darnell Nurse was at $7 million instead of $9.25, the heat is a lot less on him in the market. It's a lot less on him in public perception, etc. So if they were able to retain money, I think that there's a chance, a possibility that happens. And 2, I would also add to that, this is a big summer for Darnell Nurse in general. I think there's a chance that someone as athletically and physically gifted as Darnell Nurse, the things that you got away with in your early 20s in terms of your training and your habits, at some point they catch up to you and you've got to do things a little bit differently. And you've got to, not saying he's not putting in the work. Of course he is. And he is physically fit. It's just your body's different and everyone else around you has caught up to you. So I think whether he's with Edmonton or not, this is going to be a big summer for Darnell Nurse to get back on track.
See, I don't think conditioning is Darnell Nurse's issue at all. I think it's decision-making with the puck. I think he's got to improve his outlet passing. And you know what? I'd be working more and more with the skills coach if I was him. I'd say there's like a 5% chance. He's got a full no movement clause. He's very tight with McDavid and Draisaitl. Obviously, they came as close as you can come without winning the Stanley Cup. And I think that they'll bring back the majority of the band on the back end, to be honest. And because I don't think Edmonton's in a position to, you trade Nurse. I agree. I've said it all along. The minute he signed his contract, yes, he was going to be overpaid. And, this past season, it's funny. The first 3 months under Coffey, Darnell Nurse played very well. After the All-Star break and in the playoffs, there were times when he really struggled. And, he's got to find some consistency in his game, but I don't think Edmonton is going to just make a rash decision and give up on him and just to shed some salary. So I think very low % chance he's moved this summer. I think he would need another year, because 2 years ago, Darnell Nurse was excellent for the Edmonton Oilers. And I don't think they'll just throw it away for a struggle. I think there's lots of opportunities for him to rebound. And when you play him with the defenseman, him and Cody Ceci, neither one of them is great in passing. So if you separate them, they're both better.
I want to add one thing to that. It's not necessarily it becomes about math more than anything. And at 9.25, he's incredibly problematic for right now for a cap table that in the very near future, provided that everyone stays, and I threw this out there before, maybe this number's a touch high, but you're potentially looking at $40 million devoted to McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard in the very near future. McDavid 6. This is just pure hypothetical. Like it's easy back of the napkin math. McDavid 16, Draisaitl 14, and Bouchard 10. That is 2 years away from that being your cap for the season. You can't have Darnell Nurse at 9.25. So your point is well made. Either you address it now or you address it in the future. My thought process, if I'm the Oilers, would try and be as aggressive as you can out of the box or out of the gate this summer before everyone sees on paper that you have all those things coming. And then it becomes a near impossibility to pull off without someone really trying to stab you in the neck with an ice pick.
All right. There we go, gents. That is a wrap on this week's edition of Fill in the Blank. Once again, brought to you by the Daily Faceoff Live free agency special, getting going at 11 a.m. Eastern on July 1st.
Also, the NHL Player Awards. Man, is there a lot going on right now, Frank? I think most of us agree Hughes is going to win the Norris. Who do you have as the Calder and the Hart and the Ted Lindsay?
I voted for, I'm not going to give you my full ballot, but I voted for Connor Bedard. I know that's in some ways a controversial pick because some people think that Brock Faber, who had a tremendous season,
that's who I voted for.
Better rookie this year. I also think with zero help around Bedard, it was pretty impressive what he accomplished. Like, if you were an opposing team going to play the Blackhawks this year, you only had to worry about stopping one player. There weren't multiple lines. There weren't multiple pieces. It was quiet one player and win the game. That's as simple as the equation was. And it's not simple for Faber to step in and play the minutes that he did and produce the way he did. But I viewed it as incredibly tight, and I ended up going with Bedard.
Okay. What about who did you have for the Hart?
I had Nikita Kucherov. I thought the way that he separated himself from the rest of his Tampa Bay teammates, the award was most valuable to his team. It's not most valuable to the league. I'd have a hard time making a real argument that someone was more valuable to their team this year than what Kucherov did.
Well, I think it's him and McKinnon, and that's about it. The Ted Lindsay will be fascinating because it's just who they think was the best player, and I could see Kucherov and McKinnon splitting those two. That's would be
the only thing about McKinnon, and this isn't a knock. He was unreal this season. I think two things helped his candidacy. One, he gets more style points than Kucherov. He just does. He's more front and center. He's won a Stanley Cup more recently. He's just this force of nature, and Kucherov is really just sublime to watch. It's different. One's punch you in the face, and one is very mellow. And two, there's this undercurrent, Jay, and I think you have to acknowledge it. Not saying you, but publicly people do, is that for whatever reason, when someone hasn't won something and is close, some people just tend to be like, oh, this is his year. And like, some people were like predetermined heading into this year. I'm not saying voters, but publicly it's like, oh, it's time for McKinnon to win the Hart. Like that's really not how it works. And he still had a 100-point teammate in Rantanen that had a fantastic year in his own right. Like, it's just not, to me, it wasn't the same as Kucherov. And if he wins, I'm not taking anything away from him. McKinnon will be totally deserving. That's how I viewed it on my own personal ballot.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And anytime I vote, I only vote on the season and what happened this year. I don't care if the guys did it 8 years in a row. If he's still the best, then he's the best. It's not about, wow, this other guy. To me, that's not how the awards are for. It's not a participation ribbon. It's not everybody's going to get a Hart or everybody's going to get a Norris. It's who had the best year that year in their respective categories. Should be fun. Frank, enjoy Vegas. Stay cool. That's another edition of the Rundown brought to you by Bet365. We'll be having a special edition next week, of course, for free agency. And then we will get into a summer, which is going to be short as always with lots of movement. We'll get into the announcements of our teams for the Four Nations Cup as that's coming down and much, much more. So Frank, enjoy Vegas. Stay cool.